Jake Morrison stood in front of the mirror in his small quarters, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform for the third time. His hands were shaking slightly, which annoyed him more than the nervousness itself. He was 32 years old, had negotiated trade deals with 4 different alien species, and had once talked his way out of a hostage situation on Mars, but today he was getting married to someone he had never touched, never would touch, and barely knew the marriage was not his idea. It was not even a real marriage in the way humans understood it. It was a political arrangement, a symbol, a desperate attempt to prevent a war that could destroy both Earth and the Velthari Empire. The peace treaty required a union between the 2 species, and Jake had volunteered when no one else would. He looked at himself in the mirror one more time. Brown hair, brown eyes, average height, nothing special. What was a powerful alien warrior diplomat going to think of him? He had seen pictures of the Velthari, but he had never met one in person. They were tall, elegant, with skin that looked like living crystal and changed colors based on their emotions. They were also completely unable to touch other species, due to some biological incompatibility that their scientists had never fully explained. A soft chime indicated someone was at his door. Jake took a deep breath and opened it. His friend and fellow diplomat, Pete Collins, stood there with a worried expression. "You sure about this, Jake?" Pete asked, stepping into the room. "It's not too late to back out?" "They could find someone else," Jake shook his head. "We've been through this. The Velthari specifically requested someone with my diplomatic experience, and honestly, who else is going to do it? Would you want to be married to someone you can never touch?" Pete frowned. "That's exactly why I'm worried. This isn't just a job, Jake. This is your life. You're giving up any chance of a normal relationship, a normal family." "Normal is overrated," Jake said, though he did not sound entirely convinced. "Besides, maybe it will be easier this way. No arguments about whose turn it is to do the dishes. No fighting over the remote control." Pete did not laugh at the joke. "What if you fall in love with her?" Jake paused. It was a question he had been trying not to think about. "Then I guess I'll deal with that when it happens." An hour later, Jake found himself in the main diplomatic hall of Haven 7, the neutral space station where the ceremony would take place. The room was filled with representatives from dozens of different species, all there to witness this historic moment. The human delegation sat on one side, the Velthari delegation on the other. The 2 groups looked like they were from completely different universes, which in many ways they were. Jake stood at the front of the room, waiting. His palms were sweating, and he wiped them on his pants when he thought no one was looking. The Velthari ambassador who had arranged the marriage, a stern-looking being named Keth, had explained the ceremony to him. It would be simple. No rings, no kiss, no physical contact of any kind. Just words and witness promises. Then she entered the room, and Jake forgot how to breathe. Zara of the Velthari was 7 feet tall, with long limbs and a graceful way of moving that reminded Jake of a dancer. Her skin was a pale blue color that seemed to shimmer in the light, and her hair was white as snow, flowing down her back like liquid silver. Her eyes were large and silver, with no visible pupils, giving her an otherworldly appearance that was both beautiful and slightly unsettling. She wore a simple white robe that seemed to be made of the same material as her skin, shifting and changing color slightly as she moved. As she walked toward Jake, her skin began to shift from blue to a pale green, which Jake remembered meant curiosity or interest in Velthari. In motion color charts he had studied, when she reached the front of the room, she stopped exactly 3 feet away from Jake and inclined her head slightly. It was the closest they would ever be able to stand to each other. "Jake Morrison of Earth," she said, and her voice was like music, with a slight echo that made it sound like she was speaking from inside a crystal cave. "I am Zara, daughter of the High Council, keeper of the Northern Territories, and now, if you accept your wife in the eyes of both our peoples?" Jake cleared his throat. He had practiced his response dozens of times, but now his mind went blank. Yes, I accept. I am honored to be your husband, Zara of the Velthari." The ceremony continued with formal words from both human and Velthari officials. Treaties were signed, promises were made, and pictures were taken from a respectful distance. Through it all, Jake found himself stealing glances at his new wife. Her skin had settled into a warm, golden color, which the chart said meant contentment or satisfaction. That seemed like a good sign. When the ceremony was over, Jake and Zara were escorted to their new living quarters. The space had been specially designed for their unique situation. It was large, with clearly defined areas for each of them. 2 bedrooms on opposite sides of the main living area, 2 workspaces, even 2 small dining areas. A thick red line had been painted on the floor throughout the quarters, showing the boundary that must never be crossed. "Your people are very thorough," Zara observed, looking at the line. Her skin had shifted to a pale purple, which Jake thought might be amusement. "We try to be," Jake replied. "Though I have to admit this is a first for us too." They stood in the main living area, looking at each other across the safe distance. Jake realized he had no idea what to do next. What did married couples do when they could not touch, could not even sit next to each other? "Perhaps we should talk," Zara suggested. "We will be spending considerable time together. It would be beneficial to know something about each other." "Beyond our official files?" Jake nodded. "That makes sense. Would you like to sit down? In your area?" Zara moved to a chair on her side of the room, and Jake sat in a chair on his side. The distance felt strange and formal, like they were having a business meeting rather than getting to know each other as newlyweds. "Why did you volunteer for this?" Zara asked. "Your file says you are well regarded in your diplomatic corps. You could have had your choice of assignments." Jake thought about how to answer honestly without sounding either noble or pathetic. "Because someone had to, and I was the best qualified. And because I thought it was important. This war would have killed millions of people on both sides." "That is a good answer," Zara said. Her skin shifted to a warm gold again. "But it is not the complete answer." Jake looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "You also volunteered." "Because you are lonely," she said matter-of-factly. "Your file shows no significant romantic relationships in the past 5 years. You work constantly. You have few close friends. You thought perhaps a marriage, even an unusual one, might be better than none at all." Jake felt his face getting red. That's pretty direct." "The Velthari do not believe in deception, especially not self-deception," Zara replied. "Was I wrong?" Jake considered lying, but something about her silver eyes made him want to tell the truth. "No, you were not wrong. I guess I did think that. Maybe this could be something good for both of us, even if it's not what either of us originally planned." Zara's skin shifted through several colors quickly, purple, gold, then settled on a soft blue. "I also did not volunteer for this assignment," she said. "I was chosen by the High Council. But I find myself curious about you, Jake Morrison. You are not what I expected a human to be." "What did you expect?" "Someone more dude, more aggressive, more concerned with physical desires." Her skin flickered with what might have been embarrassment. "I have studied your species, but I have never lived with one." Jake laughed, surprising himself. "Well, I can't promise I won't be crude or aggressive sometimes. But I'll try to be the kind of husband you can live with, even if I can't be the kind you can touch." Zara tilted her head, considering this. "Perhaps," she said, "we can discover together what kind of marriage is possible between us." As Jake looked at his new wife across the careful distance that would always separate them, he felt something unexpected. Not love, not yet, but possibility. Maybe Pete had been wrong. Maybe normal was overrated. Maybe something entirely new. Could be even better. Outside their quarters, the stars of a dozen different systems glittered in the darkness, and 2 very different beings began the strange and wonderful process of learning to be married without ever touching. 3 months had passed since Jake and Zara's wedding, and their unusual marriage had settled into a comfortable routine. Jake found himself looking forward to their evening conversations, when they would sit in their respective chairs and talk about their work, their cultures, and sometimes, carefully, about their growing friendship. Zara had a sharp sense of humor that often caught Jake off guard. She would make observations about human behavior that were both accurate and amusing, delivered in her musical voice with skin colors that shifted between purple and gold when she was entertained. Jake had learned to read her emotions through these color changes, and he was pleased to see that she seemed genuinely happy most of the time. The peace between their peoples was holding, largely due to their symbolic marriage. Trade agreements were being negotiated, cultural exchange programs were starting, and the threat of war seemed to be fading. Jake felt proud of the part he was playing in this historic alliance. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Jake received his new assignment. Earth's representative to the Galactic Trade Council, Jake read from the official document. Effective immediately. Zara looked up from her own work terminal on the other side of their living space. Her skin shifted to a pale green, indicating curiosity. This is an important position, she said. You will be speaking for your entire planet in trade negotiations. Jake nodded. It's a big responsibility, and it means I'll be dealing with representatives from dozens of different species, some of whom probably aren't too happy about the Human-Velthari alliance. You will be careful, Zara said, and it was not a request. Her skin had shifted to a deeper blue, which Jake had learned meant concern or worry. Not all species value diplomacy the way humans and Velthari do. The first Trade Council meeting was held in a large conference room in the diplomatic section of Haven 7. Jake arrived early, reviewing his notes and preparing for what he hoped would be a routine session about mining rights in the Outer Rim territories. The conference room filled with beings from across the galaxy. Jake recognized most of the species from his diplomatic training, though he had not worked directly with all of them. There were the insectoid Crix from the Hegemony Federation, the plant-like Verdani, the crystalline shimmering ones, and several others. Ambassador Crix of the Hegemony Federation was a particularly intimidating figure. Merely 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and a chitinous exoskeleton that clicked when he moved. Crix had been vocal in his opposition to the Human-Velthari alliance from the beginning. He believed it gave too much power to what he called primitive newcomer species. The meeting began peacefully enough. Trade routes were discussed, mining permits were debated, and Jake contributed to the conversations when Earth's interests were involved. He was starting to think his first council meeting would pass without incident. Then the topic shifted to a disputed asteroid field that both humanity and the Hegemony Federation claimed mining rights to. The Terrans have no legitimate claim to. The Kepler Belt, Crix declared, his voice a harsh buzzing sound. They arrived in this sector only decades ago. The Hegemony has been mining these regions for centuries. Jake stood up calmly. With respect, Ambassador Crix. Earth survey teams discovered and mapped the Kepler Belt. Under Galactic Trade Council regulations, discovery rights take precedence over historical proximity claims. Crix's exoskeleton shifted colors, darkening to what Jake knew was anger in his species. Primitive species hiding behind technicalities and alien wives, he buzzed contemptuously. The room fell silent. Jake felt his face getting hot, but he kept his voice level. I think we should focus on the legal merits of the claims rather than personal attacks. Personal attacks? Crix rose from his seat, towering over the conference table. You want to see a personal attack, little human? Before Jake could react, Crix had moved around the table with surprising speed. One of his forearms shot out and shoved Jake hard in the chest, sending him stumbling backward into his chair. That is what I think of your discovery rights, Crix buzzed triumphantly. The other delegates looked shocked. Physical violence was strictly forbidden in Trade Council meetings. Jake steadied himself, more surprised than hurt, and was about to respond when he felt something change in the room. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, but suddenly, as if someone had opened an airlock to space. Jake's breath began to mist, and he saw other delegates pulling their robes and coverings tighter around themselves. Then he heard Zara's voice, though she was not in the room. You have touched what is mine, came the musical voice. But it sounded different now, cold, dangerous. Every translator in the room was working overtime, adding harmonics and overtones that made the words sound like grinding metal and breaking glass. Crix looked around the room in confusion. Where is that voice coming from? Jake's communication device activated, projecting a hologram of Zara in their quarters. Her skin was no longer the gentle blue or gold Jake was used to. It was deep crimson, pulsing like a heartbeat, and her silver eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "I am Zara of the Valthari," she said, and her voice carried through every speaker in the station. "You have touched my husband with intent to harm. This cannot be permitted." Crix laughed, a harsh buzzing sound. "What can you do to me, alien? You are not even here." Zara's image smiled, and Jake had never seen anything more terrifying. "I am not there," she agreed. "But I am everywhere else." The meeting ended abruptly as delegates rushed to check on their own affairs. Jake hurried back to his quarters, his mind racing. When he arrived, Zara was sitting calmly in her meditation pose, her skin now a serene pale blue. "What did you do?" Jake asked. "I responded appropriately to a threat against my husband," Zara replied matter-of-factly. Over the next several hours, Jake watched in amazement as Crix's world began to fall apart. First, his personal trade fleet developed critical engine failures. All 12 of his ships reported simultaneous problems with their navigation systems, forcing them to dock at the nearest repair stations. Then Crix's personal and business accounts were frozen by the Galactic Banking Consortium due to irregularities requiring investigation. The irregularities turned out to be evidence of illegal weapons smuggling that mysteriously appeared in the banking records. Next, Crix's diplomatic immunity was revoked when the Trade Council received anonymous tips about his violation of the Physical Violence Prohibition Treaty, complete with security footage from 17 different angles that had not existed during the original meeting. By evening, Crix had been arrested, his entire business empire was under investigation, and his government had recalled him in disgrace. "How did you do all that?" Jake asked during their evening conversation. Zara's skin shifted to a warm gold, indicating satisfaction. "The Valthari have been part of the galactic community for thousands of years longer than humans," she explained. "We have connections, relationships, and information networks that span multiple star systems. When someone threatens what is ours, we use all available resources to respond." "But isn't this a bit extreme?" Jake asked. "He just pushed me. Now his entire life is ruined." Zara's skin shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue. "Jake, you must understand something about my people. We do not believe in proportional response. We believe in absolute response. If someone is willing to touch you with intent to harm, they have declared themselves an enemy of our alliance. Enemies must be dealt with completely, or they will try again." Jake sat back in his chair, processing this information. "So this is what happens to anyone who hurts me?" "This is what happens to anyone who hurts you intentionally," Zara corrected. "The Valthari distinguish between accident and malice. Crix acted with malice. His punishment fits his intent." "And if someone accidentally hurts me?" Zara's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple. "That would depend on the circumstances. But know this, my husband, you are not just married to me. You are married to the entire Valthari concept of honor and protection. To harm you is to insult our entire civilization." Jake looked at his wife across their careful distance. 3 months ago, he had been a simple diplomat who volunteered for an unusual marriage to help prevent a war. Now he was apparently one of the most protected humans in the galaxy, married to someone who could destroy a being's entire existence without leaving her meditation chair. "Is this why no one else volunteered for this marriage?" he asked. Zara's skin shifted to what Jake now recognized as amusement. "Perhaps they were not as brave as they thought," she said. "Or perhaps they did not understand what it means to be truly loved by a Valthari." As Jake prepared for bed that night, he reflected on the day's events. Part of him was disturbed by the ruthless efficiency with which Zara had destroyed Crix, but another part of him felt something he had not experienced in years, completely safe. Tomorrow there would be another Trade Council meeting, and Jake suspected word of what happened to Crix would have spread. He wondered how the other delegates would treat him now that they knew what his wife was capable of. He was about to find out that being married to a Valthari meant never having to worry about bullies again. Word traveled fast through the galactic community about what had happened to Ambassador Crix. Within a week, Jake noticed that other delegates treated him differently. Some species now bowed slightly when they saw him. Others crossed to the other side of corridors to avoid him. A few looked at him with what appeared to be fear. Jake was not sure how he felt about this new respect. It was certainly easier to get his points heard in meetings, and no one interrupted him anymore when he was speaking. But he also felt like people were not seeing him as Jake Morrison the diplomat. They were seeing him as the human who was married to someone who could destroy their lives. "Is this bothering you?" Zara asked one evening during their usual conversation time. Her skin was a gentle green, indicating curiosity and concern. "A little," Jake admitted. "I want people to respect my work, not just fear what you might do to them." Zara's skin shifted to a thoughtful purple. "Fear and respect often look the same from the outside," she said. "But I understand your concern. You wish to succeed on your own merits." "Exactly," Jake said. "Though I have to admit, it is nice not having to worry about people like Crix anymore." "There will always be people like Crix," Zara replied. "Some beings cannot resist testing boundaries, especially when they think the consequences might not apply to them." Jake would soon learn how right she was. 2 months after the Crix incident, Captain Rex Palmer arrived at Haven 7 with his unit of Terran Colonial Marines. They were stopping for shore leave before heading to a patrol assignment in the Outer Rim. Palmer was everything Jake disliked about certain types of military officers: loud, aggressive, and convinced that diplomacy was for weaklings. Jake first encountered Palmer in Murphy's Bar, the station's main gathering place for humans. Jake was having a quiet drink with Pete Collins, discussing the latest trade negotiations, when Palmer and 3 of his Marines walked in. Palmer was a big man, over 6 feet tall and built like a wrestler. He had short gray hair, scars on his face, and the kind of swagger that said he had never met a problem he couldn't solve with his fists. He looked around the bar like he owned it. "Well, well," Palmer said loudly when he spotted Jake. "If it isn't the famous Jake Morrison, a human who sold out to alien scum." The bar went quiet. Jake felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "Captain Palmer, I presume. I've heard about your unit's work in the Outer Rim. You've done good service for Earth." Palmer laughed harshly. "Don't try to sweet-talk me, Morrison. I know what you are. You're the guy who married a freak because you couldn't get a real woman." Pete started to stand up, but Jake put a hand on his arm. "Captain, you've been drinking. Maybe you should call it a night." "Maybe you should mind your own business," Palmer snarled. He moved closer to Jake's table, swaying slightly. "You know what I think? I think your alien wife is all talk. I think she's got everyone scared over nothing. What's she going to do? To me, I'm a Terran Colonial Marine. I eat aliens for breakfast." Jake stood up slowly. "Captain, I really think you should—" Palmer shoved Jake hard against the wall, pinning him there with one large hand. "You really think you should what? Tell me what to do? You're nothing but a traitor who sleeps with monsters." Jake could smell the alcohol on Palmer's breath. He could also feel the man's genuine anger and disgust. This was not just drunken bravado. Palmer really believed what he was saying. "Let me go, Captain," Jake said quietly. "Or what?" Palmer sneered. "You'll call your freaky wife?" Palmer stopped talking because the temperature in the bar had suddenly dropped 20 degrees. Frost began forming on the windows, and everyone's breath started misting in the air. Jake felt Palmer's grip loosen as the Marine looked around in confusion. Then the lights in the bar began to flicker, and every screen in the place started displaying the same image: Zara's face, her skin deep crimson with rage, her silver eyes glowing. "You have touched my husband with intent to harm," came her voice. From every speaker in the bar. "Captain Rex Palmer of the Terran Colonial Marines, your actions have been noted." Palmer let go of Jake and stepped back. "This is some kind of trick," he said, but his voice was not as confident as before. "No trick," Zara's image replied. "Only consequences." Palmer's communication device started beeping frantically. Then every Marine in the bar got emergency calls simultaneously. Jake watched as Palmer's face went pale while he listened to his. Incoming messages. What did you do? Palmer demanded, looking at the screens showing Zara's image. I responded to a threat against my husband, Zara said simply. Check your ship, Captain. Palmer and his Marines rushed out of the bar. Jake followed at a distance, along with most of the other patrons. They all wanted to see what had happened when they reached the docking bay where Palmer's ship was berthed. They found chaos. The ship's artificial intelligence had gone completely rogue. It was systematically ejecting all of Palmer's personal belongings into space through the cargo bay. Clothes, pictures, books, everything Palmer owned was floating away into the darkness. Override the AI. Palmer shouted at his tech sergeant. I can't, sir, the sergeant replied. It's not responding to any commands. It says it's acting on priority. Orders from Velfari High Command. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few hours, Jake watched in amazement as Palmer's life began to unravel in ways that made what happened to Crix look simple. Palmer's military records was suddenly flagged for review due to discrepancies that had never existed before. His ex-wife on Mars began receiving anonymous messages about hidden bank accounts and assets that Palmer had failed to declare in their divorce proceedings. His current girlfriend found evidence of 3 other relationships Palmer had been hiding. The Colonial Marine Corps received detailed reports about Palmer's unit's recent activities, including violations of engagement protocols, misuse of military equipment, and unauthorized shore leave extensions. Every mistake Palmer had made in the past 5 years was suddenly being investigated simultaneously, but Zara was not finished. Palmer's entire unit found their equipment malfunctioning. Their weapons failed certification inspections that they had passed just days before. Their ship's navigation system began routing them to the wrong destinations. Their communications were being monitored and recorded by systems they could not identify or disable within 24 hours. Palmer's shore leave was canceled. His unit was placed under investigation, and he was facing court-martial proceedings on 17 different charges. Jake found Palmer sitting alone in the bar the next evening, no longer the swaggering bully from the night before. The Marine looked broken, staring into his drink with the expression of a man who had lost everything. Why? Palmer asked when Jake approached his table. I just pushed you. I didn't even hurt you. Jake sat down across from Palmer, maintaining a safe distance. She doesn't see it that way, he said. To the Velthari, intent matters more than results. You didn't push me by accident. You wanted to humiliate me, to show everyone that you could hurt me without consequences. But this is insane, Palmer said. My whole career is over. My life is ruined. All because I had too much to drink and got stupid. The alcohol didn't create your beliefs, Captain, Jake replied. It just made you act on them. Zara doesn't punish people for drinking. She punishes them for choosing to hurt someone she protects. Palmer looked up at Jake with something that might have been respect. How do you live with that kind of protection? Doesn't it make you feel like you're not really in control of your own life? Jake considered the question seriously. Sometimes he admitted, but I've learned something about the Velthari way of thinking. They don't see protection as control. They see it as love expressed through action. Zara doesn't destroy people because she enjoys it. She does it because the alternative is letting someone hurt me, and that's worth ruining lives over. Palmer asked to her, yes, Jake said. Because in her culture, allowing harm to come to someone you love is the greatest dishonor possible. She would rather be seen as cruel than as weak. Palmer finished his drink and stood up slowly. I guess I understand now why people are afraid of you, he said. It's not really you they're afraid of. It's what loving you means to her. Jake watched Palmer leave the bar, knowing the Marine would never be the same. Part of him felt sorry for Palmer, but another part of him remembered the genuine hatred in the man's eyes when he had pushed him against the wall. That night, as Jake and Zara had their evening conversation, she seemed more thoughtful than usual. Her skin shifted between blue and purple, indicating deep contemplation. Do you think I was too harsh with the Marine? She asked. Jake was surprised by the question. Do you think you were? He was drunk, Zara said. Alcohol impairs judgment. In humans. Perhaps his actions were not entirely his own choice. The alcohol didn't make him hate me, Jake pointed out. It just made him show it. He's had those feelings for a long time. Zara's skin settled into a warm gold. You are wise, my husband. Intent cannot be blamed on external substances. Palmer chose to act on his hatred, and choices have consequences. A year had passed since Jake's marriage to Zara, and their relationship had grown into something neither of them had expected. What started as a political arrangement had become a genuine partnership. They shared meals at their separate tables, worked together on diplomatic projects, and had long conversations about everything from galactic politics to human poetry. Jake had learned to read Zara's moods through her skin colors as easily as he might read expressions on a human face. She had learned to understand human humor and had even started making jokes of her own, though they were often too clever for most people to understand immediately. Their quarters had become a comfortable home. Jake had added human touches like books and music, while Zara had installed Valthari meditation crystals and temperature control systems. They had found a way to be married while maintaining the 3-foot distance that Valthari biology required. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Ambassador Linda Torres from Earth's Colonial Authority arrived at Haven 7 with news that made Jake's blood run cold. There's a group calling itself the Purity Coalition, Torres explained during their meeting in Jake's office. They believe humans should not mix with alien species in any way. No trade, no diplomacy, and definitely no marriages. Jake felt his stomach tighten. How big is this group? Bigger than we'd like, Torres admitted. They have cells on at least 12 human colonies, plus supporters in Earth's government and military. They're well-funded and well-organized. What do they want? Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Torres looked uncomfortable. They want to end the Valthari alliance. And they want to start with you and Zara, they see? Your marriage as a symbol of everything they're fighting against. Jake leaned back in his chair. So they're planning to target us? We have intelligence that says yes, Torres replied. Jake, these people are dangerous. They're not just protesters or political opponents. They're willing to use violence to achieve their goals. That evening, Jake told Zara about the coalition during their usual conversation time. Her skin immediately shifted to deep blue, indicating serious concern. How credible is this threat? She asked. Linda seemed pretty worried, Jake said. And she's not someone who scares easily. Zara's skin shifted through several colors before settling on a determined silver. Then we must be prepared. I will contact my people and arrange for additional security measures. What kind of security measures? Jake asked. The kind that ensure your safety, Zara replied, and something in her tone told Jake not to ask for more details. The formal dinner 3 days later was supposed to be a celebration of the first anniversary of the Human-Valthari Trade Agreement. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in Haven 7's main banquet hall to commemorate the success of the alliance. Jake wore his best formal uniform, and Zara appeared in a flowing robe that shifted through all the colors of her emotional spectrum. They sat at the head table, maintaining their usual distance. While speakers from various governments praised the peace and prosperity the alliance had brought, Jake was actually enjoying himself. The food was excellent, the speeches were mercifully short, and several delegates had complimented him on his work as Earth's trade representative. He was starting to think that maybe the coalition threat had been overblown. That was when Danny Walsh struck. Walsh was working as a server, wearing the standard uniform of the catering service that had been hired for the event. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of bland, forgettable face that made him perfect for blending into crowds. Jake did not notice him approaching with a tray of drinks. Walsh moved smoothly between the tables, serving beverages with professional efficiency. When he reached Jake's table, he set down a glass of water and leaned in as if to adjust the placement. Jake felt a sharp pinch on the back of his hand like an insect bite. He looked down and saw a tiny puncture wound where Walsh had jabbed him with something small and sharp. For the purity of humanity, Walsh whispered, then straightened up and began to move away. Jake looked at the small wound on his hand, feeling confused. It barely hurt, just a tiny scratch. But then he saw Zara's expression, and he realized something terrible was happening. Zara's skin had gone completely white, so pale it was almost transparent. Her silver eyes were glowing with an inner light that Jake had never seen before. The temperature in the entire banquet hall began to drop rapidly. "Neural toxin," she said, her voice carrying across the room despite being barely above a whisper. "Designed to cause paralysis and death in humans within minutes." Walsh had made it halfway to the exit when every door in the banquet hall slammed shut simultaneously. The lights began to strobe, and every screen in the room activated to show Zara's face. "You have attempted to murder my husband," came her voice from everywhere at once. "This cannot be tolerated." Jake felt a strange tingling in his arm where Walsh had injected him, but before he could worry about it, Zara was speaking again. "Velthari medical protocol activated," she announced. "Nanobots deployed, toxin neutralized." The tingling in Jake's arm intensified for a moment, then disappeared completely. He realized that Zara had somehow counteracted the poison before it could affect him. But her response to the attack was just beginning. Walsh was trapped in the center of the banquet hall. Unable to reach any exit, he pulled out a weapon, but it would not fire. He tried to activate a communication device, but it was dead. "Denny." "Walsh," Zara said, and her voice now sounded like breaking glass. "Age 24. Member of the Purity Coalition Cell on New Seattle. Son of Marcus and Helen Walsh, brother to Amy Walsh, who works as a teacher on Mars Colony." Walsh's face went pale as Zara continued. "The Coalition has 47 active cells across human space. Leadership includes Senator Robert Kane, General Patricia Hayes, and industrialist William Cross. Current membership is 8,412 individuals. Funding comes from 12 major corporations and 17 private donors." Jake watched in amazement as information about the entire Coalition network began displaying on every screen in the room. Names, faces, locations, financial records, communication logs, everything. "How do you know all this?" Walsh demanded. Zara's image smiled, and it was terrifying. "We have been watching you since your organization formed 6 months ago. The Velthari do not wait for threats to materialize. We identify them early and prepare accordingly." But Zara was not finished. As Jake and the other dinner guests watched, the entire Coalition network began to collapse in real time. Bank accounts were frozen, secret communications were broadcast publicly, and evidence of illegal activities was delivered to law enforcement agencies across human space. Coalition cells found their meeting places raided simultaneously. Their weapons shipments were intercepted by authorities who seemed to know exactly when and where they would be transported. Their leadership was arrested on charges ranging from conspiracy to terrorism. "The Velthari intelligence network spans the galaxy," Zara explained to the stunned banquet hall. "We have been part of galactic civilization for thousands of years. When someone threatens our interests, we respond with the full weight of that experience." Jake realized that what he was witnessing was not just Zara protecting him. This was an entire civilization responding to a threat against their alliance with humanity. The Velthari had been watching and preparing for this moment, ready to crush any group that might threaten their new partnership with Earth. Within hours, the Purity Coalition ceased to exist as an organization. Its members were scattered, its leadership imprisoned, and its funding sources exposed and shut down. Years of planning and organization were undone in a single evening. "You were never just married to me," Zara explained to Jake later that night as they sat in their quarters. Her skin had returned to its normal pale blue, but Jake could still see flickers of silver indicating residual alertness. "You are married to the entire Velthari concept of alliance and honor. To threaten you is to threaten the peace between our peoples." Jake looked at his wife with new understanding. "So this whole time, your entire government has been protecting me?" "Not just protecting," Zara corrected. "Monitoring every potential threat, preparing responses to every possible attack, ensuring that nothing could harm the symbol of our alliance. And you never told me because you needed to live your life without fear," Zara said simply. "If you had known the extent of the protection around you, you would have felt like a prisoner rather than a husband. Jake considered this. And now that I know, Zara's skin shifted to a warm gold. Now you understand what it truly means to be loved by a Valthari. We do not love in small measures, Jake. When we love with the power of our entire civilization behind us. As Jake prepared for bed that night, he reflected on the events of the day. He had survived an assassination attempt without even knowing he was in danger because his wife's people had been protecting him all along. The most powerful human supremacist organization in the galaxy had been destroyed in a matter of hours because they had dared to threaten him. He was not just married to Zara, he was married to an entire alien civilization that considered his safety to be a matter of galactic importance. It was both humbling and terrifying. 2 years had passed since Jake and Zara's marriage began as a political arrangement. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper than either had expected. They had their own routines, their own jokes, their own way of being together, while staying apart. Jake had learned to read every shift in Zara's skin color, and she had learned to understand the subtle changes in his voice and posture that indicated his moods. The peace between their peoples was stronger than ever. Trade was flourishing, cultural exchanges were happening regularly, and there had been no major conflict since the Purity Coalition's destruction. Jake felt proud of his role in maintaining this alliance, though he now understood that his protection went far beyond what he had originally imagined. Life on Haven 7 had settled into a comfortable pattern. Jake's work as Earth's trade representative kept him busy, and Zara had taken on additional responsibilities as a cultural liaison between their species. They had become a team in ways that Jake never expected when he first volunteered for this. Unusual marriage. Everything changed on a routine Tuesday morning during an emergency evacuation drill. The drill was supposed to be simple. All station personnel were required to move quickly to designated safety zones while emergency systems were tested. Jake had participated in dozens of these drills over the years, and they usually went smoothly. Jake was walking down corridor 7 toward emergency assembly point 3 when the drill alarm sounded for everyone to move faster. Behind him, Dr. Sam Rivers, a human xenobiologist who had been studying on Haven 7 for 6 months, was hurrying to catch up with the group ahead of them. Rivers was a decent man in his 50s, dedicated to his research on alien plant biology. He had always been polite to Jake, though they did not know each other well. He was the kind of quiet, thoughtful scientist who spent most of his time in laboratories and rarely socialized. As they rounded a corner, the drill alarm blared again, indicating that everyone needed to move to emergency speed. Rivers, who was carrying a heavy case of research samples, stumbled slightly on the metal grating of the corridor floor. Jake heard Rivers lose his balance behind him and turned to help. But Rivers was already falling forward, his heavy case swinging around as he tried to catch himself. The case hit Jake in the legs, sending him tumbling to the floor. Jake's ankle twisted as he fell, and he felt a sharp pain shoot up his leg. Rivers, still falling, landed partially on top of Jake before rolling to the side. "Oh no," Rivers whispered, his face going completely pale as he realized what had happened. Oh no. Jake sat up, wincing at the pain in his ankle. "It was definitely sprained, maybe worse?" "It's okay, Sam. These things happen during drills." But Rivers was staring at Jake with absolute terror. "You don't understand," he said, his voice shaking. "I touched you. I hurt you. Your wife is going to destroy me." Jake looked at the fear in Rivers' eyes and felt something break inside his chest. This good man, who had never hurt anyone intentionally in his life, was terrified that he was about to lose everything because of an accident. "Sam, listen to me," Jake said. "This was an accident. Zara will understand that." Rivers shook his head. Frantically, "You've seen what she does to people who hurt you. Crix, Palmer, the Coalition. My career is over. My life is over." Other people had gathered around them now, including medical personnel who were checking Jake's ankle. The news of what had happened would reach Zara within minutes, Jake knew. The station's monitoring systems recorded everything, and any injury to Jake triggered automatic alerts. "Help me get to my quarters," Jake told the medics. "I need to talk to my wife." The walk back to his quarters felt like the longest journey of Jake's life. His ankle throbbed with each step, but his mind was racing with concern for Rivers. The man had followed behind them, looking like he was walking to his own execution. When they reached Jake's quarters, Zara was already waiting in the main living area. Her skin was cycling through colors rapidly, blue for concern, green for confusion, purple for deep thought. When she saw Jake limping, her skin flashed red for just a moment before settling into a pale silver. "You are injured," she said, and her voice carried that dangerous edge that Jake had learned to recognize. "It was an accident," Jake said quickly. "Dr. Rivers was carrying heavy equipment during the drill. He stumbled and fell into me. He didn't mean to hurt me." Zara's skin shifted to a deeper silver, which Jake knew meant she was accessing information from the station's monitoring systems. Her eyes glowed briefly as she reviewed the security footage of the incident. "Dr. Samuel Rivers," she said after a moment, age 53. Xenobiologist specializing in alien plant toxins, on Haven 7 for research purposes. Clean record, no history of violence or political extremism. Rivers, who had been standing near the door looking terrified, stepped forward. "I'm so sorry," he said to Zara. "I know what you're going to do to me, and I understand. I just want you to know that hurting Jake was the last thing I ever wanted to do. He's a good man, and I would never harm him intentionally." Zara studied Rivers for a long moment, her skin shifting through multiple colors. Jake could see her processing not just the facts of what happened, but Rivers' emotional state, his sincerity, his genuine remorse. "You are afraid," she observed. "Terrified," Rivers admitted. "I've seen what happens to people who hurt Jake. I know my life is about to be destroyed." Zara's skin continued shifting colors, blue, purple, green, silver. Jake realized she was having some kind of internal debate, weighing factors he could not fully understand. "Intent," she said finally. "Intent was not to harm." "No," Rivers said quickly. "Never. It was an accident. A stupid, clumsy accident." "Consequence was not desired," Zara continued, still cycling through colors. "I would take it back if I could," Rivers said. "I would take Jake's injury onto myself if it were possible." Zara's skin began to settle into a warm, amber color that Jake had rarely seen. "Remorse is genuine," she concluded. The room fell silent. Jake held his breath, not sure what was about to happen. Rivers looked like he might faint from stress. "Dr. Rivers," Zara said, and her voice had returned to its normal musical tone. "There will be no retaliation." Rivers blinked in confusion. "What?" "You harmed my husband by accident, not design," Zara explained. "You showed genuine remorse for an outcome you did not intend. The Velthari distinguish between malice and misfortune. Your actions were misfortune, so you're not going to destroy my life?" Rivers asked, hardly daring to believe it. Zara's skin shifted to what Jake recognized as amusement. "On the contrary, Dr. Rivers, there will be compensation." Over the next few days, Jake watched in amazement as Rivers' life began to improve in ways that seemed almost magical. The Velthari Science Collective offered him a research grant worth more than his salary for the next 10 years. His work on alien plant toxins was suddenly being cited by researchers across the galaxy. 3 universities offered him prestigious positions. "This is your version of mercy?" Jake asked Zara one evening as they sat in their usual places. "This is justice," Zara corrected. "Rivers caused harm through accident, not malice. Justice requires that the harm be balanced, not punished. By improving his life, we restore the balance that his accident disrupted." Jake looked at his wife with new understanding. "So intent really does matter to you." "Intent is everything," Zara said, her skin glowing with warm gold. "A being who harms you by accident deserves help, not punishment. A being who harms you intentionally deserves destruction. The Velthari way is absolute, but it is also just. And if someone had hurt me on purpose but then showed genuine remorse?" Zara's skin shifted to thoughtful purple. "That would depend on many factors. The nature of the harm, the sincerity of the remorse, the likelihood of repeat offense." "The Velthari do not follow simple rules, Jake," We consider all aspects of a situation before responding. Jake realized that what he had been seeing as mindless revenge was actually a complex system of justice that took into account motivation, intent, remorse, and circumstances. Zara was not just a protective wife who destroyed her husband's enemies. She was part of a civilization that had spent thousands of years developing sophisticated ways of maintaining order and balance. "I'm sorry I misunderstood," Jake said. Zara's skin shifted to a warm gold. "You understood perfectly for the situations you witnessed." Crix acted with malice and showed no remorse. Palmer acted with hatred and felt only anger at the consequences. The coalition planned murder with premeditation. In each case, absolute response was justified. But Rivers was different. Rivers was different because his heart was different, Zara agreed. The Velthari do not punish good hearts that make mistakes. We help them. That night, as Jake prepared for bed, he reflected on how much he had learned about his wife and her people. What he had initially seen as terrifying absolute power was actually a sophisticated system of justice that could distinguish between accident and malice, between fear and hatred, between misfortune and evil intent. He thought about Rivers, who would now have the career of his dreams because he had shown genuine remorse for an accident. He thought about Crix and Palmer and the coalition members, who had been destroyed because they had chosen hatred and violence. Most of all, he thought about Zara, sitting in her meditation pose across their carefully maintained distance.